Hey everyone, welcome back to Right Media Group Chronicles. Today, my guest is Brianne Wood, founder and creative director of Heraldess branding and design house. She spent 7 years climbing the ladder, building a creative team from scratch. Then she said, screw it, and went out on her own to build her agency about 3 years ago now. Brianne wanted to build an agency that doesn't churn and burn, but actually sits at the table with clients as a strategic partner. Brian, I'm excited to dive into your story.
Awesome. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
To kick things off, Brian, just to give the audience a bit more of an idea, can you tell me a bit more about your agency and maybe some of your history? What got you into creative branding exactly?
Sure. I am the founder and creative director of Heraldess, and we're based in Charleston, South Carolina. That's where I live. Our agency really kind of was born out of a variety of experiences that I've had over my career. I actually started out in photography and graphic design. I dual majored. And after college, I went to New York City and I kind of went the photography route first, actually, and worked for some of the world's most influential photographers, brands. I was exposed to a lot really early on and just absolutely fell in love with completely other aspects of creative outside of just photography alone. So I learned from some really amazing people and mentors. And I also have a love of travel. After my stint in New York, I took a job at TripAdvisor, who's a big player in the hospitality space, of course. And I was a photographer for them for 3 years, traveling around the United States and photographing hotels for them. And that is what opened the door to hospitality for me, which I became obsessed with because I was basically sleeping in a different hotel every single night for a couple of years and eventually got tired of living out of my car. So I wanted to kind of settle down and put roots down. So I decided on Charleston and took a job with Charlestown Hotels, which is a hospitality management group based here. And that was where I spent those 7 years building an in-house team from scratch, whole full suite of services. And hospitality management is really all encompassing when it comes to building hotels, operating hotels. And so every aspect of marketing and creative that you can touch in the hospitality world, I have experienced and led those pieces. Over the years, creative just has exploded also just in the world in terms of all industries have become more design led than really ever before, especially now with the introduction of AI, of course, which I'm sure we'll talk about. But I just kind of decided I had kind of reached the ceiling of what building a team looked like and doing that in a corporate environment. I was ready to just sort of take the leap and do it on my own and in my own way and build new relationships and take on new challenges. And so that's kind of how we got here. And now we specialize in hospitality, of course, which is a huge part of my background, and also professional services as well as lifestyle brands. So those are really kind of the three pillars that we specialize in.
Yeah, of course. I really sort of want to dive a little bit deeper into the mindset that you had because I feel like there's a lot of people that can relate to the story that you went through. Like you were in a great position. You said you built your team up from scratch, but you sort of hit that ceiling and you got taken away from work that you felt passionate to do, which you hit a time saying that's enough. Was there like a specific sort of project you were on? You had a meeting with somebody and they said like you can't focus on this anymore. We want you doing something else.
I think it was a combination of things. I don't think there was one specific thing, but I do think it was definitely you don't realize until you become a creative director how little creative you're actually going to do.
Yeah.
And that happens very slowly as you grow. You graduate from being a designer to a senior designer, and you graduate to an art director, and then you become a creative director. And over those years, you are in more meetings and you are leading more strategy. And there's a lot of components of that that I absolutely loved and have taken with me into, building an agency of my own, which is a completely different thing. But I really miss just designing, to be honest. And there's a lot of designers who really there's something very magical and special about that the art of creating, and I just didn't want to lose that part of myself. And so I just figured maybe I can use the business strategy and all of the administrative and communication organizational skills that I've learned and just apply those in a little bit of a different way, but also have the freedom to still be creative and lead the design portion, which, I was moving farther and farther away from.
You mentioned that branding is pretty much storytelling, which you feel very passionate about. I'm wondering what separates brands that survive from brands that actually matters? So sort of the difference between the two.
I think having a point of view, I think in this day and age, companies are a little hesitant to have a point of view. The world's very divisive. There's a lot of stories out there. There's a lot of competition out there, and it's hard to figure out where you fit in a very saturated market. So that's something we work very specifically on with a lot of our clients is market positioning, differentiators, like what makes you special, what makes your product special, what makes your service special. And there's a lot of different things that could be, but how do you tell that story? And I think that's a lot of what clients and companies come to us for is help us tell the story, help us visualize the story. Because the story, I really think brands that have a story and have a point of view and have a clear vision and can articulate it are just far more successful. I mean, I'd be willing to bet there's a lot of data to back that up, but also I just think from like a brand trust perspective, because branding doesn't always have marketing ROI. It's not paid media. It's not, it can't always be something extremely specific, but there's trust, there's brand loyalty, there's consistency in the execution of the brand. And those are the things that we focus on. It's not just the story, it's not just the visuals, but it's that whole entire package and it being seamless out in the world and people understanding exactly what you're trying to say makes a cohesive story and it makes people believe you and believe in what you're trying to do. And so that's our focus.
I want to go back to what you mentioned about the ROI because I think it's a very important aspect to cover that in branding and businesses. How do you explain to them the ROI or the potential there, right? Because most businesses want that ROI, and I'm sure there is one, but it's not as tangible for this as it is for running paid ads, for example.
Yeah, exactly. And the phrase I use a lot to kind of just summarize it is that branding is an investment, it's not an expense. I think people have a really hard time swallowing the cost of branding a lot of times because there isn't as direct of a correlation of where that ROI in the end comes from. But it could be years down the road. You have to be able to understand the value of that from a long term perspective because it really is a major investment.
Yeah. And my follow up question to that, can you give me an example of a client who came to you with no story and you had to build it from scratch? Because you said branding sort of amplifying their story. What if they don't have a story?
Yeah. And I think that's very common in the hospitality space, especially. There's a few different camps of kind of how hotels come to be. There's ones that are kind of just very cookie cutter in some senses, and it's really just the owners might be financially driven. And so that's a bit of a different story and a different challenge of where are we pulling the story from? Whereas there are hotels that we call them adaptive reuse, where, they might be older buildings like old banks, or I did a project that was, an old metalworking foundry up in Asheville quite a few years ago, and that had an innate story. So there's projects that have history and legacy, and that might come from the owners themselves. Like that might be their family. It might be their family's project, or this is something that they want to leave as a generational gift for their children. There might be a story to pull from there. There might be a story to pull from the location, or the city might be undergoing, a revitalization, or the neighborhood is, has been burned down and we're rebuilding, something new on top of it. So it's just trying to find the thread that you can pull a story out of. And that can come from a lot of different places. It's not always clear, but that's our job is also kind of trying to figure out where the story lies. And that's, I think, probably the most fun part to me too, because we always kind of propose doing what we call like a branding session or a workshop. And that's really where you get all the stakeholders of the project in the same room for a half of a day, a full day, 2 days. And you really unpack, what do you like about this? What's the history of this place? Why did you decide to build a hotel? Is this your 10th hotel or is this your 100th hotel? Are you building one and you're never going to build another one again because this is just like a passion project for you? And so it's really like breaking down the questions, the purpose, the vision, the ideas. What other places have people traveled that have kind of inspired where they want to go with this? Restaurant and food experiences that they've had that, are kind of informing what they want to do on the F&B side. So there's a lot of ways to break it down, and that just translates in a variety of ways for storytelling.
I'm sort of feeding my own curiosity with this question, but I'm wondering if you ever had a situation where, for example, there wasn't like a passion, it was mostly financial, being financially driven. And have you ever had a situation where you couldn't pull that story out?
don't think there's ever a situation where you can't come up with a story, right? That's the whole point of branding. And maybe in that case, it is more destination driven or community.
Okay.
What's happening in the community. There could be. We like to dig into like the design history of a place or of an existing site or something like that. So going back, and I just did a hotel project in Louisiana actually, and a lot of what we did was, because it's a newer build, so there's not like a legacy there to pull from, in terms of like the building itself. But we sort of went back and looked at signage from, the fees, like Creole and Cajun design and all the influences of New Orleans and Louisiana and the culture there. And so we pulled the story from the culture, from the people, from the soul. And that, that's not any one person or specific story that was, directly tied, but it's a much broader look at design and how it can influence, a new brand that maybe doesn't have a very specific point of view going into it.
That's interesting for me. You mentioned that legacy or that destination that a business is going to. So there are things that you're looking out for. That gives me a bit of an idea. You said culture, for example, for this new development property, right? So yeah,
Yeah.
that's very interesting what you mentioned there.
Yeah. I think too, sometimes it's also looking at your competition.
Mm.
Because if you just kind of stay isolated in your own bubble, you sort of miss what everyone else is doing. So that's a lot of the work too, right? Is looking at who's already in the area, who's your competition going to be, how are they positioning themselves, what's the story that they're telling, where do we fit, where do we not fit, is there a gap that we can fill, where we can be creative and say like, "Oh, the market has this and this, but it doesn't really have this, so maybe that's where the story comes in, and we're going to create something new, and bring a fresh idea into the mix." So there's a
Yeah.
variety of ways to look at it.
It's sort of risky trying something new, though, isn't it? Something that hasn't been tested in the market in a way. I'm guessing with branding as well.
Yeah, it is risky, but I also think that's where the opportunity is.
Well,
Because if everybody's doing the same thing, you're kind of all going to get the same results. And so some of what, it does take convincing sometimes to get a client to kind of get on board with an idea that isn't necessarily well represented, but that I do think is where there's really great opportunity.
I mean, without data, you can't really be testing anything, right? And I'm sure that that gives you data as well. Talking back to the ROI that you mentioned. So, how do you prove ROI on something as intangible as a story? Or maybe you have like a before and after when somebody went through that branding journey.
Yeah, I think it's a couple of different things. I think one, definitely the before and after. I mean, we do a lot of that in our own case studies when we're pitching is a visual change. That's something that people can understand and appreciate when something goes from maybe average or subpar to elevated and modern and, you know, just well executed. I think that's one. I think often it kind of comes back in the form of feedback from other people. I think as the brand gets out in the world and is exposed to other people, because usually it's a fairly small team, that's working on the initial idea, and then as it gets rolled out, there's always feedback. Marketing and creative is a subjective space, and so you're going to know whether people like it or not, and that feedback always comes in, whether it's positive or negative. And so, I think that's always one where you can tell that something has legs and it's gonna last, or if it's trendy, or you get that peer review essentially in that critique. And that's another way. For some industries, reviews are huge, and so you can tell, you can pretty much tell pretty quickly if, you open a new retail store or you open a hotel, that there's going to be reviews, and those reviews are going to be clear whether they're having a good experience or not, and what that ties back to. If there's a connect between the story that you're telling and the experience that the guest is having, you're gonna pick up on that. Are they getting 2-star reviews, or are they getting 5-star reviews? And so all of those things kind of help inform the ROI. In certain industries, obviously there's data to back it up. So in the hotel space, is the hotel filling? Are they booking rooms? And at what rate are they booking those rooms? So, we look at all that stuff to help us, kind of see, are we performing where we thought we would be? Are we under? Are we over? How are people talking about the brand? Are people repeatedly coming? So, guest loyalty is kind of a phrase that we use in the hospitality space. Are people coming back? And so, those are all just different ways that we look at it, but it informs, it certainly informs ROI. and also how are things performing from a design space, so like website analytics, obviously we're looking at those, we're looking at
Mm.
email design, we're going back and we're analyzing like, okay, this color translated really well, but we're really struggling to print this one consistently. What can we do? Should we pivot? And so I think having those, whether it's quarterly or annual, or you don't just let the brand out into the world and you never look at it again. You should always be evaluating and trying to improve upon it and iterating. And I think that's an important part of the process.
So that's why continuality is very important. But let's say, for example, you have a client. It's not just let me do branding work with you and then see you later. It's is that continuality that you need to have. So how long do usually branding clients stay with you? What's the time frame there?
So it depends. We do a variety of projects. So obviously, we do projects where branding is, what we've been hired to do. And then, maybe they have an in-house team who's kind of going to execute it from that point forward. So there'll be a handoff or a training of how to use the brand, how to roll it out, train them on how to use the website, that kind of a thing. And that, that process typically for, a medium to large scale project is anywhere from 3 to 6 months for an initial brand build. That's the brand strategy and sort of the messaging and the copywriting and the market positioning stuff. And then of course there's the visual build out, logo design, naming. Naming is so much fun. I love the naming part of the process. And then, the actual physical deliverables of the brand, whether that's a website or collateral kit or something like that. So it's a long haul. So, even for something that's a one-time project, we're spending a lot of time together for a good 6 months. And then of course there's clients who stay on or who come to us with the goal of, hey, we have stuff, we need it to be better, but we also need you to execute the brand. So, we have clients that are on retainer with us who we've come in, we've fixed everything, or we've said, hey, we'll redesign the logo, we'll do this, we'll do the brand strategy part. And then we also take care of all of their creative services for them as almost an in-house team. So that's kind of another service that we offer. And that way we not only create the brand, but we then control the brand as well. And we help them keep the guardrails on it and make sure that it's executed the way that it was intended to be executed. Because that's, I think, the harder part is
Yeah, of
actually
course.
doing
Yeah.
doing the branding, creating and designing is one thing, but actually executing it in the real world in
Yeah.
business is a different thing entirely.
The last thing you want is for your branding to have sort of different voices across different channels, right? You want to make sure that's consistent all across. So yeah, I'm getting that omni-channel approach.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But talking back to that ROI, when you spoke about it, it seemed like you've had situations where a client just didn't get it. So I'm sort of wondering, is that an often repetitive thing where a client just doesn't get the ROI from branding and they just don't proceed with it just because it doesn't make sense to them?
I think it's pretty rare. I think usually somebody's not really engaging with us on branding unless they have some level of understanding of the value that it brings. It
Mhm.
just really depends what their business goals are. What are they hoping to get out of it? Some people might just be looking for sort of like, hey, can you just design a logo real quick? And like, I don't really need more than that. I think that happens a decent amount. That's just not really our thing because we do see branding as a more strategic piece of the puzzle. And so we do really encourage people to go a little bit deeper with it and make sure that what the visuals are doing are representing the overall story and the point of view and all of that. So I think sometimes it's maybe more kind of a conversation about why you should maybe do more and not necessarily like just check the box and move on. But typically I don't find that people don't kind of understand the base of it.
No, that's great that you haven't. I think even now, like maybe 10 years ago, the
Hmm.
businesses had to know what really branding us, what's the benefit of it. Now it's like if you don't have branding, it's like you don't have that foundation. So how can you accelerate that growth by doing ads or paid advertising, other marketing services?
Yeah, yeah. It's an absolute necessary thing to have. There's no way around it. And so I think people do recognize that, but maybe don't recognize the value of the other pieces and thinking about it way more holistically and going way deeper on it and what that can do for the brand. I think that's just where the miss is sometimes. It's like, oh, just spin up a quick logo and like let's move on to the next
Yeah.
thing because there's so much that goes into starting a business and it's an easy thing to miss, but I think the people and the brands who do invest more in that upfront thinking and the upfront strategy pays off in the long run way more because we do have clients who come to us and say, "Hey, we have this, but it wasn't well thought out in the beginning and we need to go backwards now." That happens a lot more, I would say, that, like, they're just
Because
trying to
they
get it
wanted to
done.
rush. Yeah.
They're just trying to launch and, see that quick return, and it doesn't come, and then they kind of are like, "Yeah, we jumped the gun a little bit. We wish we had just spent more time on it in the beginning, and now we need to fix it." So, that's what we do way more of.
Talking about growth of the agency, what would you say is currently working really well?
I think we have really amazing partnerships. We don't really, because I built an in-house team, that's the core of my experience has always been in-house. I bring that attitude to the agency. So I don't really actually, we don't even refer to ourselves as an agency. We refer to ourselves as a branding and design house because I feel that in-house is where we succeed the most. So we treat our partners like we're an extension of their team. If they have a marketing team, we're the design component of that team. We're the brand strategy component of that team. And so I think we've built really, really strong relationships. Most of our clients are referrals, word of mouth, from people that we've worked with before or that I have connections with. And so we're really lucky that there's established trust there and we just like try to build upon that trust. We're not really looking to get work and churn and burn, like I said, and just kind of grow and grow and grow. Our goal is not growth is not really our goal. Ultimately, it's just really, really building solid trust with our partners and just doing like really good work with great people. I say that all the time. I have an amazing team and I have an amazing book of business and I'm super happy that I have both of those things. And so just like building slowly on top of that is my goal.
Yeah, just going out there and doing great work, and then it just bound to return back to you by those
Yeah,
referrals. I think you
exactly.
mentioned this in our previous call. It's like when you do good work, the clients just naturally sort of refer like other, businesses in the same sort of industry.
Yeah.
Because, or they just see your work and they're like, oh, who did that? Oh, it's Brianne.
Yeah. Yeah, and that happens all the time, and you don't know where it's gonna come from. And
Mhm,
so,
mhm.
when we just recently kind of got a lead from someone that we worked with who's a recurring client now, but years ago, they also worked at the company, happened to like hear and see our work while they were there, went on to work at a different company, and now they've reached out for us to come on board. So I've never even talked to this person. I don't know them, but our work and hopefully the way that we've treated our clients has represented ourselves that, they want to kind of come back to us again.
And conversely, would you say there is anything challenging in the agency world space right now from your experience?
Yeah, I think AI obviously is kind of the elephant in the room, right? You can't avoid talking about it, but I don't see it as a bad thing. In fact, we're sort of using it to further our business in a lot of different ways. Like right now, my developer Kenny, who's wildly talented, is working on building us our own project management system and essentially replicating the one that we pay for, right? So building proprietary tools and technology. And, we're building custom brand voice chat GPTs for clients so that they can sort of manage their own brand voice without us having to, kind of check everything over for them. So there's a lot of different ways to utilize it, but I do think it's a challenge because it has opened the door to, in a way it's raised the ceiling because the difference between amateur creative and professional creative I think is going to be obvious more than ever. But I also think it's made creative more approachable. It's lowered the floor, the entry. So now, essentially anyone can get Canva or get on a ChatGPT and spin something up and write a brand narrative. And it's really the difference between who's going to utilize those tools in a way that's not, you know, spitting out something generic, and how are we going to use them to either make our what we already do better and improve upon it, or
Mhm.
use it as a brainstorming tool that we then take back and create something extremely unique out of. um, and explaining the difference, of how we use AI and how it's not you putting something into AI is not the same as what we do, I think is a challenge of just explaining, is an education that's going to happen in the industry, but it takes time. It's not something that worries me, but it is a challenge.
Yeah, I think I know what you mean because you mentioned that entry point being lower for other agencies, right? So that makes the market very saturated, which speaking to other agency owners in the last 5 years, it's been quite saturated. And there's all these freelancers calling themselves agencies. And then unfortunately, but you've had this as well, clients have been burned in the past by these freelancers that call themselves agencies. And I think we're going to come to the time that it's going to become more popular. And unfortunately, that builds up a wall they have, which you need to bring down in order for them to trust you again.
Definitely. And that's why trust is huge.
Yeah.
And you don't take it for granted when you've built it. That's, we've built our whole business on that model. So
Yeah.
it's really important.
Talking back to, you said it's a relationship based client partnership you have. When you said you didn't really want to scale, but if you wanted to scale, how would you scale beyond the referral model if that was ever on the plate or on the plan for you?
Yeah, I mean, it's something that we've thought about recently, actually, because we're at the point where we have so much going on that we're kind of growing organically, and so it's really what projects do we want to take, being selective about what we do and how we do it, because we do a variety of ways. So we have clients that are hourly, we have clients that are on retainer with us, and then we have those one-off larger scale projects. I really I love the larger scale stuff because typically more complex, there's more layers to it, there's more strategy involved. So I'm really sort of kind of going after those types of projects. And really, of course, there's a lot of different ways to do that. We work with, we work closely with other people in the space. So in hospitality, especially, we have connections with architects, we have connections with developers, we have connections with asset managers. And so there's a lot of course, in industries where you're specialized, it's a small world. We all know each other. And so there's a lot of kind of backdoor referrals that are happening, or, oh, hey, I heard about a product over here. You'd be great for it. Or vice versa. I heard about this. I think you'd be great for it. So there's a lot of just tapping into that organic network that's happening. I've been really lucky up to this point that because a lot of our business has just come from word of mouth and referrals, that I haven't really even tapped the full extent of
Oh,
my
nice.
network even. So I'm still really educating people in my own life about the business and what we're doing. And so there's going to be opportunity there, I hope. And outside of that, we're also kind of going after the consulting piece of the business, because I also think where we bring a lot of value in my team, we've been working together for over a decade. And so we have a lot of wide variety of skill sets that we bring to the table. And so one thing that we're really working towards right now is building the consulting arm of our business, where not only do we do branding, but we'll also come in and say, okay, we've built in-house teams, we've managed in-house teams. So how's your team structure set up? What does your project management system look like? What's your process? What does your creative process look like? What tools do you have? What positions do you have? And do you have the right positions? And do you have those people in the right places? Um, so it's almost like, it's business strategy as well, and kind of helping teams get optimized and evaluate them and analyze them, not only from a creative standpoint, but business, standpoint. So I think that's something we really haven't even tapped into yet, but that we're really interested in doing. And so right now we're kind of talking with some consulting firms and getting
Yeah.
in the door at some places to do that, which I think would be really fun.
That sounds really exciting because it's sort of like an audit on their business and
Mhm.
how they can improve themselves pretty much. So it's just another opportunity for you to offer them value. So it's like another thing you adding to the plate pretty much with
Yeah.
your services. So that sounds really exciting. I hope you crack the code for that and really
Yeah.
go full on.
I'll report back.
Yeah, sounds great. Yeah, maybe we can have another mini podcast, talking about that new sort of
Yeah.
journey you've had with consulting. Sort of talking about the AI and execution, you mentioned you do use AI. I'm sort of wondering, to what extent do you use AI? Because there is that pain of using it too much and then you're just being like everyone else out there, especially with content.
I think for me, it's mostly a brainstorming tool. I also think, for creatives especially, there's a lot of technical components to being a creative, and not everybody knows the inside and out of every single piece of software, right? So, where YouTube tutorials, I think, were kind of huge up to this point, I'll be like, oh, I don't remember how to do this in Illustrator. Can you just basically give me a step-by-step breakdown of what I'm trying to do? Or, hey, I'm working on a spreadsheet for a client of some data stuff. Can you write a formula for me? I'm trying to do X, Y, and Z. So, I use it a lot for the business, much less than I do the creative side, because I I'm an expert in creative. So I don't necessarily lean on it as much for that. But I will say I use it for brainstorming. I think when it comes to naming, that's a really powerful tool. Naming is very difficult. So, if you're trying to come up with 100 different name options for a new business, that's a great way to brainstorm and say, "Hey, give me 500, you know, other hotel names or other retail store names that are fun and feminine and also feel coastal and southern." you can get just a starting point, and then you can kind of break down the information and say, okay, what's relevant and what's not relevant. And I think that is the skill that creatives are going to have and are going to need to have more than ever, is taking the information and figuring out what to use and how to use it. But really, to me, it's mostly a brainstorm tool. Obviously, the copywriting component is huge. A lot of people are doing that. We don't work in like the social media space. That's not our thing, but I obviously have seen a lot of use cases for that. But I have a writer on my team, and she's obviously very familiar with what it's being used for in terms of the writing space. But I find that mostly what comes out is recognizably AI. I don't think we're at the point yet where most of the output is that unique. And I think it was very scary in the beginning because you were seeing just how powerful it is. And I think obviously it is going to get more and more powerful, and it's going to learn kind of how to create unique things more and more as we go. But I'm not overly impressed with the output, I will say. So I'm not relying on it for writing copy and all this stuff, because I just don't think it has the character and the human centered creativity that we have yet. We'll see what happens, but I'm leaving the door open. It's experimental. It's really interesting. It's extremely powerful. There's no doubt, and I'm interested to see what happens with it. But I'm certainly not putting all my eggs in that basket.
Every creative agency that I was spoken with, and sorry for saying agency, I think you said you love to be
You're
called brand
okay.
design house, but they like to say that AI is a tool and it won't replace them. So I want you to be honest. What part of your job do you think AI is coming after first? In like the next couple of years, what's your prediction there?
I hate to say it, but I think writing would be the obvious one, even though it's not, even though I don't think it's a powerful writer, and a unique writer. It is good with words. And so, even from the perspective of, I've seen it in other industries, I think more than ours so far, because there is that, you need to be creative, and that is like our whole job, is creating something individual and unique and special. But grant writing, I've seen proposal writing, those things, because it is more formulaic. Those, I do fear for those particular pieces. I do think that the AI agents as well, that's very interesting. Project management to some extent is going to be replicated by AI and agents. And, whether that's, sending an email when a certain PDF comes in, or changing the status in the project management system. These agents are very powerful, and now they can act like you inside of the system if you train them properly. So that's one area that I think there's some opportunity there for AI to take over. But I think it's again, that's not a bad thing. I have a director of operations, Margot. She's been with me forever, and she's using it, because there's a lot of value in automation and automating the project management pieces that she does manually, so that it can free her time up to do other things. So I think I'm less concerned about it taking other people's jobs. I think it's just, we just have to adapt. New jobs are going to be created. It's going to be completely new ways of thinking if we get on board, and we have to get on board. It's not going away. And it's just all about how you use it to your advantage and not see it as a threat.
Adding on to what you said about the proposals, I spoke with somebody who spent about 4 to 5 hours on proposals, but now because they've created a little workflow, and straight away from the meeting, the note taker sort of feeds into the AI, and it's got these guidelines to meet for the proposals they use. Now it only takes them 10 minutes max. Can you
Absolutely.
imagine saving 4 to 5 hours and now it only
Yeah.
takes you 10 minutes? That's
Yeah. I
crazy.
mean, the automation is wild. And I
Yeah.
think the other thing I mentioned, we're building our own project management system. And part of that is, I think that there's some threat to the tech world for sure. Because like somebody like me, I'm not a developer, I'm not a software engineer, but I have the power now to go into these tools and vibe code and build these things that I wouldn't have been able to do because I don't know code. I don't know JavaScript.
Yeah.
So I'm really interested to see how that impacts things. And I hope it drives the price of things down, because as a small business owner, that's something we really struggle with is, we're looking for unique features in tools and systems, and, they're asking for enterprise level pricing, because that's their sales strategy, right? Is like, oh, you don't get these features until you're at enterprise level. And maybe we can't afford that because we're a small business, and that's not in our budget. So if I can go out and build it myself, then I don't need the system anymore. And so I think that there's going to be a lot of that out there, and that excites me because
Yeah. It
That
gives you
opens.
opportunity to stand out to, like you said, you're building your own project management tool. That must be really cool. I heard from agencies, apparently some project management tools have got this, the others have got this, but none of them have
Exactly.
got everything. And
Yep.
that's what you're building right now, which
Yeah.
is really cool. Can you tell me what sort of features you're adding together? Just keeping me a
Yeah.
little bit curious there.
Yeah, one piece is definitely billing and time tracking. That's been one
Mm.
where we've run into kind of some walls with some of the other tools in terms of, different projects have different rates. And, we have internal rates and external rates, and being able to roll those up so that we're not exporting spreadsheets and importing them into Excel and then pivot tabling and then putting them into an invoice. There's a lot of manual work that goes into that. And so we're building the ability to just have all that stuff built into our project management system, and it just rolls up automatically for the client as well. So there's going to be, for us, there's, some systems you have to really get the permissions and the settings, and the user can do this and they can't see that. And it's a lot of manual work to get that set up, build them a different section where they have their stuff that's visible. And so for us, we're going to kind of basically just have a toggle that's like, okay, client experience is on. And so they're gonna have a completely different view. They're gonna see all of their stuff, whereas, like, we don't want our clients to have to email us and be like, "Hey, are we close to hitting our retainer this month?" We want them to just be able to log in and see it. Be like, "Okay, you're at 72%
Oh, yeah, that's cool.
utilization." So, just some of that automation. It's a lot of work right now, but to not have to do that every week, every month, every year, and have that all be automated will be huge, and will open up our time to go do other things that we're more interested and passionate about.
Course, and the fact that it's in-house is you don't need to rely on those external tools and softwares that you talked about where they charge excruciating amount of money. You just build your
Yeah.
own tool now, which
Yeah.
is just crazy. Now have a developer at your expense, you can just use them as you please because of all this vibe coding that you touched point on.
Yeah, yeah. The barriers are low, and that's
Yeah.
exciting, and it's opening up whole new avenues of design that, never even existed. And there's a lot of hope and positivity and optimism, in that
Um,
in that possibility. I mean, it's like when, Adobe was created. People were drawing and faxing and scanning, and, when Adobe software was released, that changed the game, and this is just another version of the game being changed. And so it's just going to result in new opportunities. Things will change and evolve, and positions will be eliminated and positions will be created. That's been going on for forever. So it's not something new. It's just that it's happening in a very condensed time frame. I think that is more of the
Very
scary.
rapidly, yeah, and you need to adjust your business to it or get left behind, with the trend train.
Yeah.
But I have heard a few businesses, they're like, "Yeah, I'm staying clear of AI," and I think that's a very silly decision to do because if anything, it can make you more efficient, and why wouldn't you want that?
Yeah. Yeah. Efficiency is key. And why wouldn't you want to be more efficient? And it is true. I mean, I think the more exposed you become, I think we were all creative people. I think we would all be lying if we said we weren't hesitant when AI was
Mm,
released, and we
yeah.
were all like, "What is this? What's going to happen here?" I think that would be naive to say we weren't scared, but I think as it goes on, as we see what it can do, we see the power and the ability behind it. And if nothing else, it's just spurred new ideas. And, I think if you just have that mindset, it just becomes a lot less scary.
Of course. Brian, I'm doing something fun, something new, where I ask you a few rapid questions and you try to answer in a few sentences or less.
Okay,
Okay, are you ready? I'm gonna put
I'm
you in a
ready.
hot seat now.
Okay.
So my first question is biggest branding trends that need to die in 2026 in your opinion?
Honestly, AI generated logos.
Ooh, okay. And what would you say is underrated that more brands should be doing?
Unique copywriting.
Okay, yeah, good. I like it. If you could rebrand any company in the world, who would it be and why?
Any company in the world.
Rebrand. So obviously they're doing a great job. So
That's a really tough one. Any company in the world.
we'll skip that one.
It's a good one.
So
Okay.
one piece of advice for agency owners who are drowning in client work and can't find time to build their own brand. This is not a rapid one. This is a deep one.
Really deep thinking. I think organization and communication, I think those are two very underrated skill sets. Project management, I think, is highly overlooked and underrated. I didn't really understand the value of it until I had a project manager, and now it's really something I can't live without. And so I think, figuring out what you can delegate or what is not your strength. For many creative people, organizing stuff is not our strength. Process is not our strength. So we have to find ways to delegate it and find it to be someone else's strength so that we can focus on what we are really good at. And so I would just encourage them to just take a step back and figure out what is and isn't your strength. And if it's a weakness, figure out how to make it a strength.
That's great. That's great advice. I want to sort of explain it more to the audience. So, when you say delegate, if you said you're small as well, what if you're too small to delegate or to hire somebody for it? How can you still focus on the business, but you can't also delegate? Sorry, I'm going to make this challenging for you.
Yeah.
It's like, well, what you went through when obviously in these 3 years that you started your agency.
Yeah, I do think it's, kind of going back to the idea of process. For me, at the very core, it's, how can I execute as fast as I need to execute, but
Mhm.
within this process. So I'm very strict on myself and on my team about the folder structure that we use, exactly where things are saved, the file naming conventions, the way that the files are set up. And it's autopilot to me now. So whereas years ago, 10 years ago, before I built my first in-house team, I was just saving stuff to my desktop, saving stuff in my downloads folder, like things are everywhere, but like I have the excuse of being like, oh, it's fine, I know where everything is. I think a lot of creatives lean on that a little too hard. And then it snowballs out of control and you have storage is a mess. You're paying for storage at different places and you don't have the time to clean it up. Just get the process right from the beginning. Create a folder structure, create client codes or naming conventions and just follow it. So like all of our files, it's the same exact naming conventions. The client codes, the year, the month is the project and then it's if it says final at the end, it's a final working file and you can zip it up and send it. So like if you have the same exact process every single time, I mean, it's like a machine. I don't even think about it anymore. And I'm just thinking about being creative.
It's interesting you've said that because you're not the first person to mention it. Because few agency owners have said if I could go back to the beginning when I had a lot of time, the first thing I would do is create SOPs for everything,
Yep. And
and that's where that
it's
organization
lost.
comes in.
It's lost because it is a weakness of ours because that's not what we're interested in doing. I would much rather be drawing and designing and creating logos and
Yeah.
writing brand books. And so we tend to put our energy towards the things that we love doing the most and we let the not so fun grunt work stuff go. But really, the hidden work is where the efficiency lies. Because if you can just tap into making that seamless, you won't even think about it. Or if you can automate it, obviously now you have AI. So lean on that. Tell it exactly what your current process is and where you can improve. And I'm sure that it will come up with a few ideas for you to try.
Yeah, of course. Great advice there, Brian. And my last question to you is what is your goal for the branding and design house this year?
This year is a little bit of growth. I think the last 2 years, we've really got a really solid foundation. I'm super, super proud of the work that we've done, but I think we're ready to go after bigger fish and we're excited to do that. We're excited to be innovating more, building these tools and building this proprietary stuff for clients, I think is super exciting. And we'd like to be out there, I think pitching more and going after, bigger projects. So that's really my goal for the year, but always, always keeping my focus on being grateful for what I already have and not losing losing sight of what's important and just optimizing and elevating and just continuing to get better. And that's, I think that's the biggest thing for me.
And just a curiosity, if you could fix one bottleneck, if you had a magic wand, you could fix one bottleneck that would help you to get to that goal much quicker. What would it be?
Probably taxes and accounting. I think it's the small business administration. You go
Mm.
into owning your own business with rose-colored glasses and it is an exciting opportunity to be your own boss and be an
Oh,
entrepreneur, but you do get bogged down in things that you didn't realize you would have to do.
yeah.
And, taxes and reconciling your books and payroll. Those are all things that as a business owner you have to do all the time. And that sort of takes away from some of the other things. So I think if I could remove one bottleneck, that would be it.
Have you hired somebody in house? Do you have any advice for anyone who's sort of starting out and having this issue? Do you tell them do it yourself or hire like a contractor that can do X amount of hours a month just to keep things in order in your business?
I think it's both.
It's both.
I do think there's a lot of value in doing it yourself. I intentionally did
Mm,
not hire an accountant the first year because I wanted to make sure I really understood the business front to back and I didn't rely on someone else to manage that for me. So I feel like a responsibility. It is my business and I want to really make sure that it's under control and that I'm making the right decisions and that I have a close eye on that. But now as I get more experienced in that area, I'm comfortable letting my account handle it, right? So I do think there's a lot of value in both, but maybe it's just that, it's a quarterly check-in with an accountant to make sure everything's, you're doing everything you're supposed to be doing and you don't get to tax season and have a big surprise. But I do think that, you need to have your eyes on it. So
Yeah, of course. I appreciate the fact that you said you rather understand the process yourself before you hire somebody else to do it for you. Because it's sort of, in a way, that turns out to be a bottleneck. You hire somebody else to do it for you. And then if they're sick or they can't do it, suddenly you are in a bad position. And then what do you
yeah.
do then?
Or, it's another expense, right?
Mm,
You have to have a system for this, and you have to have project management system, and you have to have email, and you have
God.
to have Google Drive storage, and all these things. And so the expenses add up. And that's one
Uh-huh.
area where, you're not only are you going to learn a lot and you're going to feel empowered, like you understand it, but it's also one less person or system or something that you have to pay for. So it's just a balance of what's important to you or where do you want to spend your time. Everybody's different.
Yeah. Brian, thank you so much for spending an hour with me and letting me pick your brain on this podcast.
It was a pleasure.
I'm glad to hear that. So, if people wanted to connect with you, find out more information about what you're doing and your services, where could they find you?
Well, you can find us on our website, which is heraldess.com. And we're also on the social media, Instagram and LinkedIn, of course, at Heraldess House. And you can always reach us at our email address, which is hello@heraldess.com.
Awesome. And for anyone listening, if you enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe. And all the links Brian mentioned will be dropped down below. Thank you.
Thank you.